I'm 72 years old. My name is Michael. When I look back at my 20s and 30s, I don't remember achievements first. I remember faces. Women I chased, conversations I forced, nights I confused for meaning. At the time, I believed I was confident. I thought I understood attraction, power, and desire. Now I see something different. I see a young man who didn't understand himself at all. In my youth, I believed masculinity was measured by attention. If women noticed me, I felt valuable. If they desired me, I felt powerful. I didn't question why I needed that validation so badly. I just chased it. Compliments were fuel. Rejection felt like humiliation. I was not pursuing connection. I was pursuing proof that I mattered. Sex, to me, was not intimacy, it was performance. I wasn't asking what the other person felt. I was asking what this moment said about me. Did it make me look experienced? Did it make me look wanted? I confused physical closeness with emotional worth. I thought the more stories I collected, the stronger I became. The truth is, I was insecure. I hid it well. I dressed sharp, spoke loudly, made jokes, acted fearless. But inside, I was afraid of being ordinary. I believed if I slowed down, someone would see that I wasn't as confident as I pretended. So I kept chasing women, not because I loved them, but because I feared being unseen. Back then, nobody talked about male immaturity. We called it being young. We called it being a man. But looking back at 72, I see that I wasn't being a man at all. I was being a boy, with freedom and no emotional discipline. And that confusion cost me more than I understood at the time. Perfeito. Mantendo o mesmo tom, maturidade e profundidade. Aqui está o bloco 2. In my 20s, I didn't believe I was hurting anyone. I told myself every woman I met understood the game. If she agreed to go out, if she smiled back, if she stayed the night, then everything was mutual. That's what I convinced myself. What I never asked was whether I was honest about my intentions or just performing a version of myself, designed to win. I learned early how to say the right things. I paid attention to what women wanted to hear, then shaped myself into that image. Sensitive when needed, mysterious when useful, confident when it impressed. It felt like skill. It felt like charm. In reality, it was manipulation disguised as charisma. I was selling a version of Michael that didn't truly exist. The problem with chasing desire is that it becomes addictive. The thrill of being wanted can replace self-respect. Each new connection felt like proof that I was desirable, powerful, alive. But that feeling never lasted. It faded quickly, and when it did, I needed another person to refill the emptiness I refused to confront. I also confused conquest with maturity. The more experiences I had, the more I believed I understood women. But experience without reflection teaches nothing. I wasn't learning about love or intimacy. I was learning how to avoid vulnerability. The deeper someone tried to connect, the quicker I pulled away. Looking back now, I see a pattern. I wasn't chasing women. I was chasing distraction. Every flirtation, every physical encounter, every short-lived relationship kept me from facing the one thing I feared most. Sitting alone with myself and realizing I didn't know who I was. There were women who wanted more from me. They wanted conversation after midnight. They wanted consistency. They wanted to feel chosen, not collected. At the time, I called them demanding. I said they were too emotional. What I really meant was that they were asking me to grow, and I wasn't ready to do that. I remember one woman in particular. She was patient with me in ways I didn't deserve. She asked about my childhood, my fears, my dreams. I laughed it off. I changed the subject. I kissed her instead of answering. Physical closeness was easier than emotional honesty. It required no confession, no accountability. Sex became my shield. If things got serious, I redirected the energy into attraction. If someone confronted me about my behavior, I flirted my way out of it. I thought I was clever. I thought I was avoiding drama. What I was really doing was avoiding responsibility for how my actions affected people. At 72, I understand something I couldn't see then. When a man avoids emotional depth, he doesn't protect himself. He limits himself. I thought intimacy meant exposure, weakness, loss of control. I didn't realize that real strength is the ability to stay when conversations become uncomfortable. Some of those women married other men, some built stable families, some probably forgot about me entirely. But I still remember the look in their eyes when they realized I wasn't who I pretended to be. That look wasn't anger, it was disappointment. And disappointment lasts longer than rejection ever did. As the years passed, the chasing didn't stop. It just changed form. In my 30s and 40s, I wasn't the loud young man anymore. But the hunger for validation was still there. I told myself I was just enjoying life. I said commitment felt restrictive. What I didn't admit was that commitment required accountability. And accountability scared me. I watched friends build stable relationships while I moved from one short connection to another. At gatherings, I had stories. I had charm. I had attention. But when I went home at night, the silence felt heavier than I expected. I had surrounded myself with excitement, yet I had built nothing solid. There is a loneliness that hides inside constant activity. When you are always chasing the next person, the next thrill, the next affirmation, you never sit still long enough to notice what is missing. I filled my schedule so I wouldn't feel the emptiness. I confused motion with meaning. The hardest truth came later. Some of the women I casually dated were looking for something lasting. I told myself they knew what this was. But deep down, I knew I was benefiting from their hope while protecting my own ego. That realization doesn't feel good at 72. It feels heavy. Immaturity in a man doesn't always look reckless. Sometimes it looks polished. It looks successful. It looks confident. But if you are using other people to avoid your own growth, you are still a boy inside. And the older you get, the more obvious that becomes. The consequences didn't arrive all at once. They came slowly. Relationships that could have grown ended quietly. Trust I could have built was never planted. I thought time was endless back then. I believed I could always change later, settle later, become serious later. Later is a dangerous word when you are young and arrogant. There were moments when I almost chose differently. A woman who truly saw me, a chance to stay instead of run. But choosing depth would have required me to confront my fears. It would have required honesty about my insecurities, my jealousy, my need for approval. It felt easier to leave before I could be fully known. As I entered my 50s, the dynamic shifted. The attention that once came easily required more effort. The charm that once impressed felt dated. For the first time, I began to sense that I had built my identity on something temporary. Youth fades. Ego bruises. Validation becomes quieter. What remains when the attention slows down is character. And character cannot be built overnight. It is formed through commitment, responsibility, and the courage to stay present. I had delayed that work for decades. At 72, you start counting what you built, not just what you experienced. I don't regret desire. I don't regret attraction. Those are human. What I regret is confusing pursuit with purpose. I spent years chasing admiration when I could have been building intimacy. There is a difference, and it takes maturity to understand it. At 72, I no longer chase anyone. not because desire disappeared, but because I finally understand it. Desire is not the enemy. Immaturity is. When a man uses women to measure his worth, he never develops real self. He becomes dependent on attention instead of grounded in character. I have learned that masculinity is not about conquest. It is about stability. It is about being able to stay, to listen, to admit fear without hiding behind charm. When you stop performing and start relating honestly, relationships change. They become quieter, deeper, and far more meaningful. If I could speak to my younger self, I would not tell him to avoid women. I would tell him to understand himself first. Attraction without self-knowledge leads to confusion. Validation without discipline leads to emptiness. Confidence without responsibility leads to regret. There is nothing wrong with youth, with flirting, with exploration, but if those years teach you nothing about empathy, restraint, and accountability, you will carry that boyhood into old age. And old age exposes what youth was hiding. My name is Michael. I'm 72, and the biggest mistake I made chasing women in my youth wasn't who I pursued. It was why I pursued them. When you chase attention instead of growth, you lose time you can never recover.